Hello, everyone, and welcome to our new episode on Cloud Launch and Learn. Today, we have our guest speaker, Hannes from Australia. Hi, Hannes. Welcome to our
Hello,
show.
thanks for having
Uh,
me.
yeah, he's joining actually from Austria, close to Vienna, and he's going to let everybody know about his session on central network management in Azure. But before diving to the session, I want to say that Hannes is a Microsoft Azure MVP, and he has been you know he has been contributing to the cloud community and to the Microsoft community for some time now. I'm not sure he will dive into details himself, and while he's
Mhm.
presenting and speaking about himself, but he's a great part of this community. And welcome to our show, Hannes. Let's bring your slides and go ahead. Floor is yours. Thank you for
Okay,
being here.
thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay, hello and welcome. My name is Hannes Lagler-Gröner. I'm a lead cloud architect in one of the biggest consulting company in Austria. I work with Microsoft Azure since the beginning. So I start with the old Azure portal. The reason for that is I'm working some years for Microsoft Austria, and that's the reason why I came into the Microsoft cloud area really soon. I'm today the 2.5 year Microsoft Azure MVP. You can find me on Twitter, Xing, LinkedIn. I also have a private blog called cloudblogger.at. I have my private YouTube channel where I share video content, and I also have my GitHub repositories where you can find scripts, solutions, and also slide decks from my presentation and so on. You can see I have many certifications, so that's not really all certifications what I have, but the main focus here is really on Microsoft Azure, and I also have certifications in other hyperscalers too, like GCP and AWS. But my main focus is Microsoft Azure for sure. Okay, so the session from today will cover centralized network management. Centralized network management is a really new product, and since today it's GA, so you can use it in your productive environment. And we will discuss the following section, the following questions in this session: the why centralized network management, the what, and the how can we deliver centralized network management on top to the additional tools which are available in Microsoft Azure. So let's cover the first question, the why. Why should we use a centralized network management? The question or the answer is really simple. So let's think about your environment, your Azure environment. Normally we are starting small. So we have maybe one virtual network, or we have maybe more virtual networks, and we want to connect all networks together with VNet peering. And over the time, we want to connect also an on-premise environment, and we're creating a hub and spoke technology, maybe. Then it's also important to have a VPN gateway in place for the on-premise connection, and for sure your network security groups. So in this case, we have 4 network security groups for 4 different VNets. If the VNets are in different regions, we need 4 virtual NSGs. And we also have the ability, the possibility to increase it. So we are placing virtual machines inside the virtual networks. The virtual networks, the VMs should be connected, should be able to connect to each other. And over the time, we get more virtual networks with more network security groups. And at the end, the complexity increases. The complexity increases really fast. So I saw this every time when I came to my customers. They start small, and over the time they have more and more virtual networks. Let's think about the enterprise scale framework. In the enterprise scale framework, we have minimum of 4 subscriptions: a landing zone subscription, an identity and management, a connectivity subscription. And in each subscription, you have normally your virtual networks connected to the spoke subscription or to the hub subscription. And for each network, you have an NSGs and so on connected. So this means you have high complexity in your environment. You have no centralization when you're using the traditional way with network security groups, with VNet peering and so on. You have the configuration inside your virtual network and inside your network security groups, but you don't have centralization. You have a really, really high operational overhead. And what is really critical, if you deploy a new configuration and the new configuration have some errors, it could be a really, really dramatically cost-intensive troubleshooting in place. So always keep in mind when you deploy, when you push new configuration, to double check the configuration, because if there are some problems, the connection will be removed or will be damaged. Okay, the answer for this is the Azure Network Manager. This is the answer for your problems in the virtual network area, in the centralization area. The Azure Virtual Network Manager is a new service. It's since today in GA, so we get an email, we get a message from today that the service is now in GA, so we can use it. We have an SLA. It's a high scalable, high available service with redundancy, replication around the globe. So it's a platform as a service model. It's replicated on different regions, and it's high availability. You can manage with this feature, with this service, you can manage your virtual network infrastructure, and you can also manage your network or your security admin rules, which is really, really interesting. On the right side, you can see where you can place the Azure Virtual Network Manager. You can place it on the subscription or a manager group or the root management group, what you prefer. But we will see this in a few minutes when we go ahead to the live demo. Okay, the Azure Virtual Network Manager is the first thing that we have to, that we'll cover, is to manage virtual networks. To manage virtual networks, we have the benefits to implement a low latency and high bandwidth between the resources, between the virtual networks. This is nothing new, so you can use virtual network peering in a traditional way also. This is not a problem. But keep in mind, when you using virtual network peering in the traditional way and you change the IP address space, you always have to think about the synchronization, because there's a new IP address space. It's possible since, I guess, a half a year. You can synchronize, you can add a new IP address space and synchronize the configuration to the VNet peer, that the VNet peer knows, okay, we have a new IP address space, we have a new route. When you're using Azure Virtual Network Manager, you don't have to think about synchronization between the peerings. What you can also do, you can roll out network changes about regions. So you can say, okay, I have my region in West Europe and in East US, for example, and I want to connect these two regions together. And I have also a region in East US 2, for example, and the East US 2 is out of scope at the moment, and we can only build up a deployment for these two regions to connect together and leave the other configuration from East US 2 behind. Okay, so these are the benefits. Let's go to the how. How can we implement the network configuration from Azure Network Manager? First of all, we have to implement the deployment process. The deployment process is really simple. First of all, you have to install, or you have to deploy the network manager, and you have to define the network manager scope. The scope could be a subscription management group and so on, but we will discuss this in a few seconds. The next thing what you have to think about, or what you have to configure, is network groups. Then you have to create a configuration, and at the end, when you have everything in place, you can deploy the configuration to your regions, what you prefer. So let's go a little bit more into details. First of all, define the scope for the network manager. You deploy to the network manager. It's really, really simple to deploy. And during the deployment, you have to choose, okay, what's your base line. So you can select your subscriptions, 1 or 2 subscription. You can select your management group if you want to implement, or if you want to add all subscription from your management group to your scope. And what you also can do is you can define a tenant level. Tenant level means you can connect a cross-tenant connection to another tenant if you prefer. So normally you have your tenant, in your tenant you have your subscriptions, you have your management groups and all subscriptions. But if you have maybe a dev environment with a separate tenant, you can also connect the network manager to the dev environment, to the dev tenant level environment, and also add the subscription or management groups from those tenant. Keep in mind, this is not hard-coded, so if you deploy the network manager at the beginning with 1 subscription or only for 1 management group, you can change the level, you can change your scope during the configuration or after the configuration if you want. Okay, now we have the scope defined. It's really simple to define. Then we have to define the network group. A network group is a container that includes the virtual network resources. You have here 2 assignment options. You have the assignment option, the static or the dynamic. We will cover this in a few seconds. Keep in mind, you can build up different environments if you prefer. You can define a network group for your dev environment, for your test environment, for your prod environment, or by team, what you prefer. So, what does the static network manager group means? This means, okay, you have your scope, and inside your scope, you have your subscriptions maybe, and you have more than one, you have many virtual networks, and you can define, or you can select all virtual networks, what you prefer, and assign it to the network group. This is a static assignment, so we will also see a manual add to your network group, and this is fixed. Also keep in mind, when you want to use the cross-tenant level, you always have to use a static network group. You cannot use a dynamic group at the moment. At the moment, the cross-tenant level is only available for network groups based on static model. The next model what we have is a dynamic group level. A dynamic group level is based on Azure policies. So in the backend, you will create an Azure policy, and you also need the permission to create an Azure policies. You can use the built-in rules like network or resource policy contributor, or when you prefer, you can also assign a specified permission based on the 3 roles, what you can see here: policy assignment right, policy definition right, or network group join action. These are the required permission when you want to implement a custom rule. Also keep in mind, when you're using a dynamic network group, this takes some time to take the effect. It takes some time. It means approx 50 minutes. 50 minutes later, you can see your network, your new network on your in your environment. Then dynamic group is based on different criteria, so you can use based by tag, based by subscription ID, based by name, but we will see this in a few minutes in the first live demo. Okay, then we have our scoping, we have our network group. Now we have to go ahead and think about to define the configuration. The configuration, you have to think about 2 things. The first thing is, what is your topology? And the second thing is a network manager group or a virtual network can be a part of up to 2 connection groups. So this means you have maybe a productive 1 group, a productive 2 group, and the virtual network could be in both groups and have different, and could have different configuration, but only 2. This is the main point here. And the second point is you have to define a topology. And the topology could be hub and spoke. So this is the most common topology what we're using. You can also define a mesh configuration. So each network is connecting to each other, if you prefer. And the third one is a hub and spoke with direct connectivity as well. So hub and spoke, in this case, the spoke is the connection to the hub is in this case the connection to the on-premise environment, and the spokes are connected to the hub if they want to go to the on-premise environment, and also have a direct connection to each other networks if you prefer. So these are the three topologies, what you can define in your configuration, and what you can roll out at the end. At the end is the deployment configuration, and in this step you can select your region where you want to deploy your configuration. You can select all regions when you prefer, or I recommend use only the regions what you have in your environment, what you have configured from the virtual network perspective, and deploy the configuration only in these regions. Also keep in mind the deployment could have a low latency. So at the beginning, the first time when I present, the virtual network manager could take up to 5 minutes. Now, normally you can see the configuration is in place a few seconds after the deployment. So we will see this in the live demo in a few seconds. Also, a really funny, from my point of view, limitations. So if you have a customer with more than 50,000 Azure subscriptions, so I don't have a customer with this amount of subscription, you can apply virtual network policies only to the subscription and resource group scope, not on the management group scope. Always keep this in mind. Okay, so that's it from the first theory section. So now we go ahead to the first live demo. First of all, I will give you an overview about the service itself, about the configuration options, what you have, about the scoping option, what you have. And then we'll go ahead and have a look to the deployment configuration settings, what you have, and the validation and deploy the configuration at the end, validate the configuration. So let's switch to the live demo. Okay, perfect. So we have here our live demo. You can see here I have two network resource group. One resource group is for my demo VMs, and you can see here I have two VMs in place. One VM is located in East US 2, and the second one is located in West US 2. We have one VM configured with a public IP address. The reason for that we will cover in a few minutes on the second part of our theory section. And the first VM only have a private IP address, and that's it. So in the second network, in the second resource group, we have implemented a bastion host for my main network in East US 2. The East US 2 virtual network have an IP address space, have also two different subnets. The default subnets where the virtual machine in West Europe is located or is connected, and the second subnet is from a bastion host. We don't have any peerings in place. We don't have any network security groups in place. Nothing is configured in this section. So when we are connecting to the VM in East US 2, we have here the IP address. The IP address is, come on. Where is it? Okay, 10.1.0.4. So this is the connected VM in East US 2. And we have a second VM. It's located in West US 2. And this VM have the IP address 10.0. Oh, come on. Where is it? 10.2.0.4. So this is the second VM. So we are now connected to one VM over the Azure Bastion host, and you can see I cannot ping. I have no ICMP configuration, or we don't have a configuration to the other virtual network. And now we want to configure exactly the configuration between those two networks over the network manager. The network manager is a service, is a platform as a service, model service, and it's really easy to install. And when it's finished install, you have here a new service, a new network manager service. And when we go inside the service, you can see at the beginning an overview page and the normal section here on the left side, an overview, activity log, access control, EM, and so on and so on. The first thing what you have to configure is the scope level. the scope level inside the tenant. In my case, I have selected here one subscription, and you can change the scope after the configuration. So when you click here, you have the ability to select other subscription as well, or you also have the ability to select an management group, add to a selected scope, and then it's in place. But in my case, it's enough. I have only one subscription in place. What you also can do is you can define a cross-tenant scope. So in this case, when I have a second tenant in place, a dev tenant, you can connect to this second tenant with separate credentials with specified permission, and also have the same ability to select the tenant or to select the scope what you prefer. During the deployment, you also have the option to select the features what you want to cover with Virtual Network Manager. In this case, I've selected two features, connectivity and security admin. Security admin we will cover in the next theory section and the next live demo section. Okay, so the first thing, so now the network manager is in place. The network manager is configured based on the scope, based on the feature section, and so on. The first thing what we have to do is define a network group. I have here two network group which are completely different. The first one is a manual network group, and you can see here when I go to the group members, I have here two network segments or two virtual networks manually added. So this is a manually added network. This is a manually added network. You can add, you can assign a new one if you want. So you can go here, add a manually member, and now the whole scope or the subscription scope will be scanned. And you can see here we have more networks, and we can select these networks, for example, click on add, and then it's a member from the manual member. Okay, this is the first option what we have, and the second option is a dynamic group membership, and this is exactly this group, this network group. When we go to this network group, you can see here when we go to the group members, you can see here it's a little bit different. On this means we have here now a policy assigned. The policy name is Pol by Tag, and the policy is assigned to the subscription to my selected subscription. And this is done by a separate policy configuration here. So here you have a policy by tag, and you can select here the configuration from the policy, and here you have the configuration from this policy. In this case, when the policy or when the network, the virtual network have a tag named NVE enabled, when it's existing on the virtual network, the virtual network will be added to the group if you after 15 minutes, approx 15 minutes. So if you want to add a new policy, you can create here as Azure policy to dynamic add members. It's really simple. You define here a name, test 1, 2, 3, 4. Select your scope, what you prefer. In this case, my scope is okay. This is my subscription. And here on the bottom, you can see here the parameter what you have. First of all, you can choose by name, select the name, so the name equals to XYZ. You can also select by ID, tag, subscription name, subscription ID, and so on and so on. If you want, you can also switch to the advanced editor. So if you prefer to write your policies in JSON, you can do this also in the advanced editor. This is really simple. So in this case, I have my two network groups in place. And what I have to do now is I have to create a configuration. And in my case, I have a configuration here in place, a mesh configuration. So in this case, you can see I have my mesh configuration, and my mesh configuration is assigned to one network group, and this network group have two members. And this network configuration is from type mesh. Okay, so what's about the configuration itself? So let's go here to a new configuration. Define here name, test 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to the topology settings, and you have here the two options, The first one is a mesh configuration, and the second one is a hub and spoke. And where I can find the hub and spoke and direct connect, it's really easy. So I select here the hub and spoke, select here an hub. For example, I use this one here and select here my spokes from a network group. I select my manually network group. And now you have here the ability to enable a direct connection between the two network groups. Always also keep in mind when you want to implement virtual networks over more regions, not in the same regions, you also have to enable the mesh connectivity across regions. This is also really, really important. It's also really important when you enable a mesh configuration, you also have to enable a mesh configuration across regions. Because when you have more regions, more virtual networks in different regions, it's required. Okay, so now we have here our configuration. We have now two options to deploy the configuration. The first, I will show you both options. The first option is you select here the configuration and click on deploy. In this case, the deployment configuration will be selected. So in this case, my network configuration mesh con. And now I can select here my regions, what I prefer. In this case, East US 2 and West US 2. Select here US, West US 2. Click on next. The connectivity is an add configuration. So I add here the configuration to those two regions, West US 2, East US 2, and click now to deploy. Now let's switch to the VM. And it will take a few seconds, and the ISMP request should be possible and available to the other VM. So a few seconds. I hope everything is working fine. My last live demo, it's working wonderful without any troubles. So here we go. Here we go. The connection now is in place between those two virtual networks. Okay, so let's go back to the configuration itself. You can see here under the deployment, we have now the deployment available in two regions. In region East US 2 and West US 2, the deployment was succeeded and the type is a connectivity configuration. So let's go back to the virtual network itself, where you can find the configuration on the virtual network base. When we go to the virtual network in East US 2, for example, normally you can find the VNet peering inside the peerings, but it's not available. The reason for that is it's not 100% the same like a VNet peering. So keep in mind, we don't have to think anything when we assign a new peer to the space. But you have here a new option, in this case, Network Manager. And here you can find the network manager configuration. In this case, the mesh configuration is a full mesh configuration and a regional scope also in place. So this is the first thing what I want to cover with Azure Network Manager. It's the easiest way and also a cool way to connect your networks centrally and also deploy it to your region. The second thing what I want to cover is the network rules. So let's think about my picture at the beginning. You have your different networks. All networks are connected together. You have more than one network security group, and the network security group is normally assigned to a virtual network subnet, so to a subnet inside a virtual network or to a network interface. What can we do with Virtual Network Manager in this case? So here we have the two different options what we have. A network security group is assigned to a subnet or a network interface, and security admin rules are assigned to a virtual network. And this is really important to understand. So if you assign, if you add a new IP address space, if you assign a new subnet with a new IP address space, the network rules will be applied to all subnets inside the virtual network. When we think about network security groups, the starting point from the priority perspective is priority 100. You cannot assign a network security group with priority 999 or with priority 1. It's not possible because 100 is the minimum priority for network security group. When we think about security admin rules, you can assign the priority 0 and also 1, 2, 3, and what you prefer. And from the evaluation order, network security admin rules always have a higher priority than network security groups. And network security groups have only 2 action types, allow and deny. And security admin groups have a third one, always allow. So what does this mean? We will cover in this picture. So normally the traffic comes in. The traffic comes in from external. The traffic comes in from a peered virtual network. And the first thing what we have to check is Azure security admin rules. So we have configured Azure security admin rules on the VNet, and this is the first rule which will be checked from the configuration perspective. If you have an allow, everything is fine. The traffic will go ahead to the network security rules or the network security group, and we'll check the rules from this group, and if it's allowed, the communication was succeeded. The second one is always allow. Always allow means when it's allowed in the security admin rule, it's always allow. You will don't use the network security rules to connect to VM. And the third one is deny. So when the security admin rules says, okay, the connection is denied, then it's denied. You can allow it on the security admin rule, network security groups. When it's not allowed, it's not allowed. So that's the benefits from the security admin rules. Let's go ahead and talk about more benefit what you have. So when we think about the operational benefit, the administration for network security groups is really hard. So if you have more than one security group in different regions, it could be really hard to centralize the management. What you can do with the network manager is you can say, okay, the team from the application XYZ maintaining their own network security groups. They can define their own rules inside the network security groups, but you always assign your company rules. For example, a port 3389 RDP is always disallowed from external access. So you can find this in your centralized configuration, and the team members can define their own network security groups if you prefer. That means administrator need to manage the all network security groups, and you also have in place a minimized operational overhead because you have a centralized configuration. From the emergency benefits, so when we want to implement a quick rule configuration to block high risky traffic, we can do this in a single configuration steps. So we define the configuration and roll out the configuration over all our environments, and then it's in place on all virtual networks. So it's really fast. It's really fast, and it's much faster when you go to each network security group. And from the protection benefit, once more, so when you provision new subnets inside your virtual networks and you don't assign a network security group, you don't have any rules in place. With a virtual network manager, you have your rules located or based on the virtual network. And when you enforce critical security rules, you always enforce it to all environments in your, to all resources in your environments. Okay, let's go ahead and have a look to the network rules. First of all, we deploy a network rule. Then we create a deployment, a deny rule, and at the end, we validate the configuration itself. So, same game. Go to the virtual network manager. We have here our configuration, we have our network group, and we have here our configuration. we have here two different configuration, connectivity configuration and our security admin configuration. And when we open this configuration, and you have seen in the past maybe the Azure firewall, the configuration is nearly the same. So you're defining a rule collection. The rule collection can have different names. So you have here a rule collection named main rule infrastructure service. And when I select this rule and go inside the rules, you can see here I have my port 80 with priority 1, inbound TCP, so it's a 5-tuple configuration. When we select here the edit configuration, you can see it's nearly the same when you configure network security groups. With one difference, when we go to the actions, we have here 3 actions: allow, deny, and always allow. We can select here the inbound, outbound. We can define here our protocols, what we prefer. The source type, in this case, you can define here by tag also if you want, and select here from the internet. If you prefer, you can define here the source port. In this case, I select here star, and the destination also by service tag or by IP address, or to any what you prefer. The second configuration is the main RDP section. And when I want to add here deny rule, so in this case I want to change it and always deny, in this case a deny rule, inbound TCP from and service tag, in this case from the internet, connection is always denied, and the service tag virtual network and the IP address. Click on save, and we will update the configuration, and you can see here a deny action. Okay, so now we have here our configuration, and I want to show you now the second way how you can deploy your configurations. So we are going to the deployment section here. Click here on deploy configuration. So I prefer the first one, but this is the second option what you have, deploy a configuration. You can select here what you want to prefer from a configuration perspective. In this case, your security admin rules selection. I'm using my main configuration. Select here my regions, STS2, ESTS2. Click on next. And before we deploy the configuration, I want to show you something. So I have on my second VM a public IP address assigned. And then on this VM, we have installed an IIS server. So here, I'm sorry, it's the wrong one. On the VM invest US2, when we go to the network configuration, you can see here I have a public IP address assigned, and I also have a DNS name assigned to this VM. And when I want to browse the VM on port 80, it's not possible because the port is per default blocked. Now I want to deploy the configuration in those 2 regions, and the deployment process will take a few seconds, and also the configuration process will take a little bit longer than the network process itself. So it will take up to 2 minutes, and then we can see the configuration. Oh, not 2 minutes, seconds, 2 seconds. So the configuration now is in place. It's really, really fast. So now the service is since today in GA, so it's much faster than in the past. So the configuration is now in place, and the question is where you can find the configuration. The same thing. So we have here the deployment option. We have here a second deployment, the security admin configuration. When we go back to the resource group from the network perspective, so we can see here on the virtual network, inside the network manager, you can see here the security admin configuration. And normally you should see here, yes, exactly, your configuration is assigned to the virtual network, not to the subnet. It's assigned to the virtual network, and it's assigned automatically to all subnets inside the virtual network. So when you add a new space, assign a new virtual subnet, the configuration will also be assigned because it's assigned to the virtual network. But this is not the only place where you can find the configuration. When we go back to the VM, to the resource groups, and go to the VM, in this case, the WestUS2 VM, and go to the networking configuration, normally you can see here your network security group configuration. But when we scroll down, you can see here, check for additional rules. And now you can see also the network manager security configuration here inside the VM itself. So you can see both configuration, and this is really important. Also from the priority perspective, you can see here, we have here priority 0, priority 1. And when we go to the network security group, we can always start with the priority 100. So this is the minimum priority. When we go here and select 99, for example, we got an error because 100 is the minimum priority. Okay, so this is really simple. It's really, really fast at the moment. Not at the moment, it's really, really fast. And it's a huge improvement from the centralization because you have your configuration inside your network manager. You can see everything here in one centralized pane. Okay, what we have, what we also have, what we have in addition is the option to implement diagnostic settings. So this is the normal way to send the configuration, send different logs to your log analytics workspace, what you prefer. You can select your audit logs or all logs, what you prefer. So this is also possible. And when we go ahead and want to remove the configuration, the process is, my point of view, a little bit strange, but we will see it in a few seconds. So first thing we want to remove, everything. We want to remove everything, the connectivity and also the security admin configuration. Select everything and select here, remove deployments. Normally, we should, normally the deployment will be removed, but this is not the case. So in this case, we have to select the configuration, main configuration, not the main configuration. We have to select none. Remove existing security configuration, admin configuration. And also from the configuration, from the connectivity perspective, select here none. Select your regions where you want to remove your configuration. East US2, West US2. Click on next. And here you can see now we have a configuration which will be removed from connectivity type and also from the security perspective type. Click on deploy. And it will take a few seconds. And after a few seconds, the ping should be lost. Yes, now the configuration was removed. It's really fast. And yeah, now we are clean. Now we have no connection to our IIS as well. So it's also not possible to connect. And at the end, finalized, I want to show you the official blog post from Andrea Mitchell, the product manager. And she said, today, Azure Virtual Network Manager is generally available. So you can use it now in your productive environment. No worries to implement a preview feature. Now it's GA. Okay, so that's it. That's from my session. 43 minutes, a little bit faster than I prefer or plan.
That was good actually. Thank you, Hannes, for sharing the network manager resource. You know how it simplifies the network management, especially when the complexity grows, right?
Yes.
And you have to have something in place to manage it. And that demos were good, simple, but still, you know, very powerful in terms of to show the functionality, how those configurations are added and removed automatically without going to each network, but doing it centrally, right, from the network manager. So from your perspective, I'll just ask a couple of questions here. So if our viewers of this Cloud Lunch and Learn show, if they are trying to decide now when exactly is a good time to use Network Manager,
Mhm.
what type of complexity is actually, you know, would pay it off to go and invest resources, invest time into Network
Mhm.
Manager with Azure? Can you
Yeah.
ask that, reply on that question from your experience in
Mhm.
terms of what's a good time to do that?
Yeah. So it depends on your strategies. So if you want to implement a centralized firewall like an Azure firewall, you can centralize, manage everything, the port configuration over the Azure firewall as well. But when we think about quick configuration, easy configuration, and also cheap configurations, and implement a really fast way to connect networks together in a simple way. You can use network managers. It's another option what you have. So if you don't plan to implement a firewall, I would think a good option could be a network manager. If you implement a virtual WAN structure in
Hmm.
your environment, I think then the network manager is not the best choice here. So it always depends on your strategy, what you have. If you want to implement a firewall, implement the firewall. If not, if you want to use network security groups to reduce the costs, always think about the network manager on top to your environment. So this is
And
the.
and yeah, and with Azure Firewall, right? As you know,
Mhm.
previously we had this standard SKU, which was a bit expensive for small businesses,
Yeah,
right? So there's a new SKU called Basic,
yeah.
which is more cost effective. So any
With
experience with
the
that?
with
Where to use that? Is the good play with
Mhm.
Network Manager service? What's your take on that? Can you
Mhm.
give some insights?
With the basic firewall, you have also the problem with the throughput. The basic firewall, I guess, they have a 500 megabit throughput. This is the maximum, I guess.
Hmm.
And with the standard firewall, you have a 30 gigabit throughput. With the Azure Network Manager, you don't have any limitation to your throughput. You can choose, you can use the whole bandwidth depending on your VM, for exactly, but you
Hmm.
don't have a limitation here. So it's a different way to configure. So yeah,
Yeah, depends on your
it depends on
demand on your network, right? So
yeah.
what's the traffic and what size of packages throughput we are talking about here?
Yes. So when you have
Hmm.
inside your network the strategy to only protect on layer 3 or 4, a
Hmm.
classical port dropping, you can choose the firewall or you can choose the network manager, what you prefer.
Hmm.
Everything the same.
Great. Thank you for that. And we have a question, right? So little, and that question was just in time. Let me bring it to the studio. Thank you,
Mhm.
Moving Elite, for putting. So, what was the firewall you guys are talking now? We are talking about Azure Firewall, basic
Mhm.
SKU and standard SKU.
Yeah.
And what we were talking about is that if your network environment is not very busy in terms of packages, and connectivity,
Mhm.
then you can go with basic because there's a throughput limitations with basic, and it's around 500 megabytes, right? Is it per
Yes.
day or it's per month? Do you remember what's the
No,
case there?
megabit per second,
Per
500
second,
megabit
yeah,
per
per
second.
second, yeah. But that's much higher on the standard SKU. So
Yeah.
again, based on that, you need to decide which Azure Firewall SKU is going to be best for you. All right.
Yeah.
That what we're talking about. So if there's any other questions, please put that in the chat. We'll follow up on that. Okay. But I think it was really, good presentation of the network, how it can grow, and then how to manage that complexity with Network Manager. Then,
Mhm.
of course, we kind of alluded into the firewall, and we spoke just a little bit here about the Azure firewall and its SKUs and where it can be used. And thank you for bringing in the VLAN, right? So
Mhm.
when you have W VLANs, uh, you know, uh, and let me kind of dive a little bit into that. When you take the VLANs and then, of course, your central management. Uh, s- uh, network manager, right?
Yeah.
You said it wouldn't be a good fit. So based on that, based on what type of, I would say, factors you would not recommend to have the network
Mhm.
manager on a VLAN network configurations. Can you expand on that, please?
So you cannot use both together. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot use a VWAN, VWAN
Mm-hmm.
configuration and network manager. It's not possible to connect the VNets to the VWAN and also bring the configuration, the mesh configuration, or roll out the configuration over the network manager. It's not supported at the moment.
I see.
Maybe in the future we will see the network manager inside VWAN. I don't know. So this is there's nothing GA. There's nothing on the NDA. So I don't know. But I think it could be a good way to bring the network manager inside the VWAN.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
But
good. Yeah,
I don't
we'll
have
see.
any
But
information.
from other perspective, Hans, would you agree
Mhm.
that the VWAN and as well as no network manager, they are kind of
Mhm.
competing products, right? Like both are
Yeah.
trying to help you in managing your network. So from, I would say,
Mhm. I have my next
final
session
goal
V1.
perspective, they are carrying same kind of kind of goal
Mhm.
to simplify your network management,
Mhm.
right? Your virtual network management. So probably that's the reason why they are not integrated or they are not there. But what will happen in the future, we'll see. It will
Mhm.
something
But
that's to
when
keep
we
an eye on.
compare V1 and Network Manager,
Yes.
when we think about the network only in Asia, so we have different regions, different virtual networks, we can use the Network Manager to connect all together.
All
When we
right.
think about a branch-to-branch connectivity over the Microsoft backend, we cannot achieve this over the Network Manager. We
Yeah.
have to use the vWAN configuration. So this
Correct.
is perfectly for branch-to-branch connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Awesome.
will
Yeah.
cover this in my next session.
All right. That's good. So that's a good actually sideway for that. So let's guys, let's focus on the next session that Hannes is going to present. It's going to be all about this branch connectivities and VLAN. All right, thank you for your session, Hans. Again,
Thank
I
you.
don't have any questions, and thank you everyone who was watching lively or going to rewatch our session on the YouTube channel. Have a wonderful day, and thank you, Hannes, for being our guest today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.
All right, thank
Bye.
you. Bye.